I'm Sarah, 26 years old. I lost my mom to illness when I was in ninth grade. Since then, I've been acting as a mom for my sister, who was only 8 at the time, while cooperating with my dad. Hey, Dad, John mentioned that maybe we should go fishing sometime. Really? My dad looked thrilled at John's invitation. John has been my boyfriend for a year now. We're both 26 and work at the same company. He joined the company after graduating from college, while I started right after high school. So in that sense, I'm his senior by 4 years. John often visited my home. In our family of 2 daughters, my dad was the only guy, so he seemed pleased to say, "Having a son is nice," and took quite a liking to John. One day, John invited me to dinner. "You haven't met my parents yet, right? Would you like to come to my parents' house this Saturday?" So I ended up meeting John's parents for the first time. On the day of the visit, we were led into the living room. John's dad, Bob, was sitting deeply in a sofa. After we exchanged initial greetings, his mom, Catherine, kindly told me, "Oh, please have a seat," noticing I was still standing nervously. Compared to her, Bob seemed a bit stern. "I'll go make some coffee." As I stood up to help, Catherine told me to stay seated and headed to the kitchen.
"So, Sarah, what about your family?"
Bob inquired. "Yes, my mom passed away from illness when I was in ninth grade. Now it's just me, my dad, and my sister living together."
"Is that so? I heard you're the same age as John. Are you 2 colleagues?"
"We are the same age, but I joined the company right after high school, so—"
"After high school? You're a high school graduate?"
Bob looked surprised when he heard I was a high school graduate.
"Dad, that's rude to my fiancé. Sarah is very competent at her job, even more so than many college graduates."
"Fiancé?" I was a bit surprised by John's words.
"I never agreed to you calling yourself her fiancé, especially since you're just a high school graduate."
"Come on, we're planning to get married. That makes me her fiancé."
"John, keep quiet. Sarah, where did your dad go to college?"
College? No, my dad also just graduated high school."
"Just high school? So because your dad didn't go to college, he couldn't afford to send you either?"
"Bob, that's really not—" His mom, who had just brought in some coffee, tried to intervene.
"Quiet. I'm talking to Sarah now. I'm the vice president of my company, and everyone in our family has a college degree. That includes John's brother and his wife. I'm ashamed to have a high school graduate in the family. I'll never approve of this marriage."
I guess she figured there was no reasoning with a dad like that.
"Sarah, let's go."
He took my hand and we left the living room. As we were leaving, his mom, Catherine, saw us out.
"Sarah, I'm so sorry this happened when you came to visit us."
"No worries. It was nice meeting you."
"Mom, we'll be in touch."
We left his house. I could tolerate them demeaning me, but making fun of my dad was too much. I couldn't forgive that. He apologized, but I told him I'm going home alone and left for my house. The next morning, he wasn't at work. Seems like he had gone to a client meeting. I felt relieved not having to face him. That night, I got a call from my dad. He had to leave for work because of some trouble at his company. After he left, I got a message from John on WhatsApp. I thought this could be the end for us. In the evening, John called me. He was very flustered and his voice was muffled.
"Sarah, my dad is on his way to meet your dad. I'm coming too."
"What? Really? Okay, I'll let my dad know." I hurriedly contacted my dad. Apparently, his dad had called him yesterday to apologize for his rudeness, but then his dad added,
"Why should I apologize? I just said what was right,"
and dismissed it.
"Fine, there's no point in talking to Dad anymore. I'm going to marry her.
Even if opposed, he declared he'd be with me.
Do as you wish.
Bob hung up abruptly.
It must be that high school graduate's daughter's fault. I'll go talk to her parents myself and make them call off this marriage.
That's what Bob had said before leaving his house.
Hello, I'm John's father.
Bob arrived at our house before John did.
Hi there, I'm Sarah's dad. Please come in, no need to stand in the door.
Bob stepped inside. At that time, I was upstairs in my room because Dad told me to stay there. I had no choice but to observe the situation. Bob, once in the living room, started talking non-stop.
My son seems to have some absurd idea about marrying your daughter, but I have always planned for him to marry a well-educated college graduate. My older son's wife is a top-notch graduate, so it would be shameful if John, my younger son, marries just a high school graduate. So let's pretend this conversation never happened.
Dad, what the heck are you doing? You can't just show up unannounced. It's rude.
John, who had arrived late, protested.
John, I've already had a talk with them. Let's go home.
Dad, wait a second.
Then my dad spoke up.
Bob, don't worry. I have no intention of letting my daughter marry your son. Feel free to go home.
Surprised by my dad's response, Bob said,
If you understand, that's fine. Come on, John, let's go.
Bob arrived like a storm and left just as quickly. Finally, some peace and quiet. I could hear everything that was going on downstairs from my room upstairs.
Sorry to have startled you earlier, but there's no need to worry.
Thanks for being straightforward, Dad. I should have felt relieved, but instead, it felt like it was really over with John. The mood sank quickly. Seeing my reaction, Dad chuckled.
Don't worry, I'll make sure you two get married. Leave Bob to me.
He promptly called his lawyer. After some time had passed, Dad said he was going to John's house and left. Apparently, this is how the conversation went at John's house.
What brings you here today? I thought this matter was settled.
Bob, aware of the visit, looked skeptical.
Yes, as I said earlier, my daughter will not be marrying.
If that's the case, there's nothing more to discuss, right?
Today, I'm here to tell you that John is now my adopted son. He will be marrying my daughter.
Was speechless.
Adoption? You must be joking.
Bob, John is indeed your son, but now he's my son as well.
Dad, he's right.
Don't worry, you still have your older son and his well-educated college graduate wife.
My dad said, sarcasm dripping from his words. Bob was visibly angry.
What are you talking about? These are separate matters.
Do what you want. Weren't you the one who said only a college graduate daughter-in-law is acceptable?
That's why I got adopted.
Now that he had his adoptive dad by his side, John wasn't backing down. That day, Dad told me he was going out due to a work issue, but it turned out that John was the issue. I'd kept quiet about my recent exchange with Bob, but my dad had heard it all from John.
My place is secure. I'm the second son, no need to inherit the family business, so I offered to adopt John.
My dad explained. Turns out my dad was actually hoping John would take over his company in the future, and the duel between John's two dads was far from over. To the astonished biological father, the adoptive father said one more thing.
There's one more thing I forgot to mention.
John's adoptive dad said, shocking biological dad.
About your company wanting to do business with John's company. I'm afraid we will have to cancel that deal.
What?
The sudden cancellation left both of Bob's parents shocked.
Why would you cancel? That deal is between John's company and ours. It has nothing to do with you.
Actually, that John's company is a subsidiary of the company I run. Guess I never mentioned that before.
Even John was taken aback by my father's revelation, a truth he was learning for the first time. That the company he worked for was a subsidiary of my dad's company, and that I was the daughter of the CEO. My dad had expanded his modest company, inherited from his father, to the point where now it had subsidiaries. I hadn't gone to college not because of financial constraints or lack of academic prowess. It was to help my dad. I decided to work immediately after high school to get professional experience to support him. But if it turns out that I am the daughter of the president of the parent company, people will be concerned. That's what I thought, and I kept it a secret. I feel bad for not telling him. But if he knew I was the daughter of the CEO, he'd never feel comfortable coming over to my house. My dad had been supporting this lie.
We're both just high school graduates. We're not your type,
my dad finally said.
So let's forget about that business deal.
I didn't mean to offend.
Bob's dad tried to backtrack, but it was too late.
My, the look on Bob's face was priceless,
my dad said, chuckling as he returned home. I wish I could have seen it. I thought a bit relieved that I'd gotten some payback on Bob. I thought that would be the end of our retaliation on Bob.
This isn't the end,
Dad laughed. The cancellation was all a charade, a lesson to teach Bob a thing or two. Of course, my dad had no intention of actually canceling the deal. Bob, unaware of this, felt indebted to my father and John, assuming they'd generously reversed the decision. With a sense of inferiority hanging over him, Bob could no longer object to the adoption or our marriage. And so came our wedding day, where everyone learned we were both just high school graduates. And there sat Bob looking mortified in the family section, thinking about the ongoing misfortune that would befall Bob. We felt some sympathy for him. Our wedding ceremony went off without a hitch.
All right, Mom, we'll pick you up when we get back from our honeymoon. I'll be waiting. Dad, from now on, it's going to be Mom, Sarah, and me living together.
Bob looked puzzled at John's words.
Living together as three?
I've put up with your constant belittling until John got married. I thought it was just a matter of patience, but from now on I'm living my life the way I want, so let's get a divorce.
Bob was momentarily shaken by Catherine's firm stance, but responded,
I've put up with a lot too. I'll be fine on my own without Catherine.
Even when faced with a divorce proposal, he refused to admit his wrongdoings till the end. After our honeymoon, my husband and I went back to pick up Catherine. Ideally, we would be living with my dad, but as it turns out, Dad said,
I'll be seeing John at work every day, like it or not. I don't want to see him at home, too.
Given Dad's comment, we decided to live with Catherine, who was already contemplating a divorce from Bob. Bob was left alone after the divorce, though he had reacted explosively when Catherine suggested the divorce.
Getting a divorce at this age is embarrassing,
Catherine said she hears him say to the neighbors whenever she goes home for her parents' caregiving. Bob had always refused to live with his eldest son and family, claiming it would be a burden. But now he's asked them to let him move in because he can't even take care of himself. Apparently, he's having a tough time adjusting to life under the strict rule of his strong-willed daughter-in-law. When Catherine heard about Bob's current situation, she chuckled.
It's fitting punishment for looking down on me all these years. I wish he'd get a taste of how I feel and get over himself.
Moreover, the president of the company where Bob serves as vice president is his own younger brother. Bob is still doing outside sales because he's inefficient at his job. He relies solely on connections, can't secure contracts, and can't stand up to his younger brother. He's lost his standing at work and at home. Turns out Bob had reasons for his demands for a college graduate daughter-in-law and his tough stance towards Catherine. He had always assumed that he, the eldest son, would take over the family business. Instead, his younger brother was recognized for his work and became the president. Ironically, Catherine was also just a high school graduate.
Marrying a high school graduate like Catherine is why I couldn't become president.
Bob blamed Catherine for not becoming president. It seemed he was releasing his stress by looking down on Catherine and blaming her. He was probably releasing stress by disrespecting and blaming Catherine. It was all his fault. As for us newlyweds, we began our cohabitation life as a trio with Catherine. Soon we were blessed with a child, and our family grew to 4. Having lost my mother at a young age, Catherine has been like a real mother to me, and she even calls me her own daughter. John, my husband, is learning the ropes at the company he's expected to inherit from my father, starting from 0. My dad seems very satisfied to have gained such a reliable son-in-law. Educational background has no bearing on a happy life. Once our child-rearing duties are a bit more settled, I plan to go back to work. My dad's the chairman, my husband's the president, and I'm hoping to join the accounting department.